Welcome to Once Upon a Tiny Farm, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can make your own loaf of sourdough bread at home. It's not very difficult. If I can do it, you can do it. I'm going to take you through step by step how you can start sourdough from home, and I'll show you how you can do it even if you don't have an oven. Like if you want to cook it on your grill, which we'll be doing in this video. I'm going to show you how we do it step by step in this video, so stick around. I remember being so intimidated about making sourdough bread when I first was getting into it and getting started, because we got into sourdough because we started learning about the ingredients in store-bought bread, white bread at the store, the long list of ingredients, and we wanted to simplify our lives and be healthier and eat healthier. And the best way to do that is with sourdough bread, because it's a simple ingredient list: water, flour, and salt. Okay, so there's a few things that you're gonna need in order to make your sourdough. You're gonna need a large bowl. I like to use this large metal bowl. It's the biggest bowl we have. And you're gonna need some sourdough starter. This is very important. You can try to make your own sourdough starter yourself. I've tried in the past, very unsuccessfully. I didn't get a good sourdough starter until I bought one I got ours from Baker Creek Seeds. They're a seed company, but they also sell a dehydrated sourdough starter, and they give you instructions on how to activate this dehydrated starter. And I've made some incredible looking breads with this sourdough starter that I got from Baker Creek, but there's also lots of other places that you could get dehydrated sourdough starter. I recommend doing that instead of trying to make it yourself, which you could do, but it's easier just to get a good starter from the start, so you make sure that you get a nice bread that actually rises instead of a hard brick when it comes out of the oven. It's kind of depressing. A few other things you're going to need is a scale and obviously some flour, some high quality flour. So here's my sourdough starter. I just keep this in the fridge. Like I said, this is cold. I just pulled this out of the fridge, and it's got a kind of a fermenty smell, almost like alcohol. And if you actually look inside here, there's a liquid on top that is actually, it's called hooch, which I believe is a kind of alcohol, or a nickname for alcohol. That means that this is a hungry starter. So I'm not going to use this just yet. I need to feed this. So I'm going to put this starter, I'm going to pour almost everything in here into a bowl, and I'm going to feed it before I start my recipe to make the actual bread. I need to activate and feed this starter. So let's do that right now. Okay, I'm just using a smaller metal bowl. It could be any kind of bowl. There's the liquid. This is gonna slowly come out. It kind of looks like when you're making pancakes, that kind of batter. This is basically just flour and salt, or flour and water. There's some active wild yeast within this starter, which is what you need to make your bread rise. Without a good starter, it's just not gonna rise. So I'm gonna pour as much out of here as I can into this container. And I follow the instructions that I got with the original dehydrated sourdough starter. The instructions that I got from my original dehydrated sourdough starter said, whenever you feed the starter, to give it 1 full cup of flour and 3/4 cups of lukewarm water. Not too hot, just lukewarm water, maybe around 90 degrees, so you don't kill the good bacteria in there. So there's that. Now I'm gonna add some flour and water to it. Got some really awesome flour. I got this in bulk from Azure Standard. I actually have a link for Azure Standard down below. If you've never heard of them before, want to check them out, you can get some really great organic vegetables and grains and different things for really good price, I think, and feed your family a lot healthier. So that's where we get all of our grains and flours from Azure Standard right there. So there's 1 cup. And then we're going to do 3/4 cups of water. Can't find my 3/4 cup measuring cup, but I just approximately filled this 1 cup with 3/4 cup of water. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I try to get those measurements each time. And then I'm using this little stirring spoon that I got at Homesteaders of America. I'll stir this up real good until it basically looks like a thick pancake batter. That's what you're going for. Okay. So we'll get some new flour and water, warm water, mixed in with the old existing starter that was just sitting in our fridge. And there you go. This is the consistency that we want. And then I'm just gonna leave this, I'm gonna cover it and leave it here for a little bit. And once I start to see some bubbles form on the top, I'll know that the starter is active and ready to be used in a recipe. And then we'll start our recipe. All right, so it's been several hours, at least 4 or 5 hours since I fed this, and you'll notice a bunch of bubbles in here, and also the level has risen. So this starter is now active, so now I'm ready to use this in our recipe. I have a scale here. I'm measuring in grams. Okay, I got my big bowl. So what I'm gonna do now is put in 950 grams of flour. Add 950 grams of flour. Could use any kind of flour. This is a wheat flour that was slightly over 950. That's okay. So now I'm going to add some water. I need 650 grams of water. Now I'm going to add the starter, about 200 grams. So these first set of stretch and folds, I'm doing 3 sets of stretch and folds 15 minutes apart. And all that I'm doing basically is I'm stretching the whole bread, all the structure that will become the bread. And as I'm stretching it in the beginning, I just pull it just a tiny bit. I don't try to stretch it so much that it breaks apart the structure of the bread. I don't want to destroy the bread. I just want to stretch it to help it develop the gluten, the part that, you know, the bread makes the bread taste like, the part that makes the bread basically taste like bread, have the bounce like bread. So it's really important to do these stretch and folds correctly. But early on, I find to be very careful with how much I'm stretching the bread. Don't try to stretch it too much that you're going to rip it. So that first stretch and fold, I'll just be very gently lifting it, stretching it, and then kind of folding it over, and I'll move the bowl and I'll do it from a different side. I'll probably do it like 2 or 3 times. I'll stretch and fold it over, move the bowl around, and do it from a different side of the bread and stretch and fold just a tiny bit. And then on future stretch and folds, the second and third time and on, you'll notice that you'll start to be able to stretch the bread, the dough, a bit more. It'll start to become more of a solid structure. You'll be able to stretch it a lot more and do this as you start to do the stretch and folds, and that's good. So you just want to make sure that you're not ripping the dough as you're doing the stretch and folds. But like I said, I'll just lift up the bread a little bit. I'll lift it up and have it have gravity kind of let it drop down towards the bowl, and then I'll kind of fold it over and then do it from a different side of the dough, and I'll lift it up again, have it start to stretch down towards the bowl, fold it over, and do it again. So that's how I do my stretch and folds. I try to be careful not to rip the dough. You just got to be careful on those first set of stretch and folds, like I said. So making sourdough bread isn't as time consuming as you might think. So yesterday we started with feeding our starter out of the fridge around 12 o'clock. We fed the starter, and it took quite a few hours until that starter was active. And once it was active around 7:30 p.m., we started doing our mixing all of the ingredients, and then doing 3 sets of stretch and folds 15 minutes apart, and then 3 more sets of stretch and folds 30 minutes apart. However, yesterday I didn't even do those last 3 stretch and folds. Now, after those first 3 stretch and folds 15 minutes apart, I will typically do 3 more sets of stretch and folds about 30 minutes apart. However, last night I started making the bread a little bit later than I wanted to. I got tired, and I ended up not making those additional 3 stretch and folds that I typically do. So we'll see if that actually makes a difference in the end product. But I find that making this bread, it's pretty forgiving if you don't do everything perfect. Just do the stretch and folds whenever you can throughout the day. And after I finished with my stretch and folds, I went to bed last night, woke up this morning, and everything had risen. It had doubled in size, and then it was ready to be shaped and put into loaves to be cooked on our grill. So this part typically I'll do on a cutting board, or sometimes right now, like I'll do it right on our table. I'll put some flour down, flour up the surface so our sourdough doesn't stick. Whole thing. Okay. That's most of it. Good. Now I'm going to cut this in half. Just cut it right down the center into 2 separate pieces. Yep. Separate it like that. Okay. And then I'm going to kind of fold in each piece into a little ball for its own little loaf.
I'll do that.
Now we're going to reshape it in a second, but this is just to form it into the ball. I kind of scrunch it up and then flip it over. There we go. Got it? And we'll leave it there to sit for a few minutes, and then we'll shape it into the final shapes for the bread that we're going to put and cook on the grill. I'm going to flip this one over. I'm going to kind of flatten it a little bit. I'm going to roll it like this, and kind of stitch these together. And then I'm going to roll it up like this. And this one is going to be a loaf that is cooked like a sandwich loaf. I'm going to put it in a loaf pan like this, and that's going to go on our grill. The other one I'm cooking, I'm going to put in a Dutch oven this size, and this is going to be more of a circular artisan style loaf. So I'm going to do the same thing as the other one. I'm going to fold them, stitch them together, roll it, pinch the sides in, and then I'm going to do is make it into a nice round ball. Voila. That's going to go in here. All right, so I've got one sandwich loaf and I've got one artisan loaf. Now, this is the point where some people like to score the bread. I'll typically do that only on the artisan bread. I usually leave my little sandwich loaves alone. I don't do any scoring, but I will put a line down the center. Makes it look really pretty when it's done. I got the grill turned on, warming up. I have everything set to about half. So it's on like the middle setting for how much heat. And I've got my bread loaf ready. I've got my artisan loaf ready. we're gonna put these on the grill. Let me put this here. This here. Now, for the first 20 minutes that we're cooking, we're gonna cover them. Do the same here. And I'm gonna set the timer on my phone, and then in 20 minutes, I'll take these off and they'll cook for another 25 minutes until the crust is a golden brown. All right, that 20 minutes is up. Now I'm going to take off these lids and cook it for another 25 minutes. Try not to burn yourself when you do it. All right, there's the progress so far. 20 more minutes. All right, this one's getting there. You see where we scored it, there's a nice little thing, it's called an ear here. You got 2 ears. It's a little bit still soft in the center here. I'm gonna give that a few more minutes. The sandwich one's a little bit smaller. This one's done. I'm gonna take this off right now. Here's our golden crisp, perfectly cooked loaf of sourdough bread. It smells so good. How's it taste? Are you eating it or kissing it? Okay. So there's no excuses for making sourdough bread because we live in a very actual tiny house. Our tiny house doesn't even have an oven, so that's why we cook it in our grill. And we've been doing that for quite some time now, and now it's so ingrained as part of our routine that we don't even rarely have to buy bread at the store unless we run out of flour. And like I said, we get our bread flour or organic bread flour from Azure Standard. I have a link for them down below. If you've never heard of Azure Standard, I really like that company. So check that out if you're interested. But anyway, that's gonna wrap up this video. This is how you can make sourdough bread at home. Very easy. I hope you try it. I think you'll like it. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.